The following is a TV Radio Mirror Magazine Gold Medal Award winner as the most original TV program of the year.
To the beautiful hills and valleys of the Ozarks came a man from the city. Among the natives of the district, he found a peaceful atmosphere and medicine for the soul. The Ozark people he lived with found him to be a good neighbor. The love, the fighting, and the shame and life and death of the hill country became a classic under the pen of Harold Bell Wright. The Shepherd of the Hills is our story. I'll tell you a story. It's new and it's old, yet the story that I tell you is one that is old. My story's old, so old. This, my story, is a very old story. In the hills of life, there are two trails. One lies along the higher sunlit fields, where those who journey see afar, and the light lingers even when the sun is down. And one leads to the lower ground, where those who travel as they go look always over their shoulders with eyes of dread, and the gloomy shadows gather long before the day is done. My story is the story of a man who took the trail that leads to the lower ground, and of a woman and how she found her way to the higher sunlit fields. This happened in the Ozarks of Missouri. In life, it has all happened many, many times before, in many, many places. The story is very old, and is new, and is still in the telling. It tells of the true love, the path it might take, for a few precious hours, a heart it might break, a life it might take. It was in the early spring of the year, corn planting time, that a stranger to the hills made his way down into Mutton Hollow. By his dress, the man was from the world beyond the ridges, and his carefully tailored clothing looked strangely out of place in the mountain wilderness. His form stooped a little, but he carried himself with nobility. His well-kept hair and beard were strongly touched with white. His face was one deeply marked with pride of birth, of intellect, of culture, the face of a scholar and poet. As the stranger walked, he looked searchingly into the wild growth alongside the path he was walking. Wearily, the old man followed the trail to the Matthews place. And always as he went, in the edge of the gloomy forest, flitted a shadowy form. I'm coming from the stately figure could be seen from the hills and the mountain holler. Why did he come today? What could he be a-searching for? Who could have led him this way? Is that a ghost they leading the way?
Old Matt was a giant. At log rollings and chopping beeves in the field or at the mill, or in any of the games in which the backwoodsman tries his strength, not one had ever successfully contested his place as the strongest man in the hills. Of the son, young Matt, the people called him, it is enough to say that he seemed made of the same metal and cast in the same mold as his father. Anyone meeting the pair as they walked with the long, swinging stride of the mountaineer up the steep mill road would have turned to look a second time. Such men are seldom seen. The stranger in the hills came to this place, to old Matt's cabin. He found with the Matthews hospitality and kindness and an offer to stay the night, and he accepted the offer. This decision would change the direction of his life.
The old man felt the handshake of old Matt and his son, at rolling logs and chopping these two great men had won. Aunt Molly said, "You'll stay the night." Now she was Big Matt's wife. Little did the old man know how this could change his life. Pain and sorrow can cut like a knife.
The stranger stood with old Matt at the edge of the pines, directly in front of 5 mounds and 5 headstones, and told him the story of the girl who rested right under the tallest of the pines.
Everybody allowed she was a mighty pretty girl. And being the only girl, I guess we made more of her than the boys. She growed up into a mighty fine young woman, too. Strong and full of fire and go. She didn't seem to care nothing at all for none of the neighbor boys like most girls do. She'd go with them and have a good time all right, but that was all. Appeared like she'd rather be with her brothers or her mother or me. And one day, out on the range, riding for stock, we met a stranger over there at the deer lick in the big low gap. He was coming along the old trail. He was big and fine looking, kind of grand like. I ain't going to tell you his name. There ain't no call to as I see. He was one of these here artist fellers, and he came into the hills to paint. He made a lot of pictures, and they seemed pretty good to us. There's one big one he painted of Maggie that was as natural and as pretty as life. He took an old cabin down to the cave and fixed it up to work in. We never thought nothing about Maggie being with him so much. Country folks is that way. Though we ought to know it better. Well, he stopped with us all that summer, and then one day he went out as usual, and he didn't come back. Maggie near went wild. She kept getting worse and worse. She appeared to fade away like. And she waited for the mail every day. Then once a letter come. She took it in the back of the cabin and read it. First I heard a scream and then a laugh, all wild-like, and this kept up a long time, and all the while she was calling him to come back. I read the letter afterwards. It told how he loved her and wanted her to come to him, but he couldn't ask because his father was too fine a man and all to have a backwoods girl for his daughter. And she calmed down after a while, but her mind never did come back. She had his boy. She died when Pete was born. The last thing she said was, "He'll come. He'll come, sure." Pete, the boy, ain't just right neither. Seemed like he was marked in some way in his mind, like you've seen others marked in their bodies.
That night, the man who was a stranger in the hills stood long at his window watching the night and the moon as they played with the pine trees in the clearing. Then the man with the proud face, the face of a scholar and poet, drew back from the window, shaking with a fear he could not control. He crept to a corner of the room and crouched on a chair. And with wide eyes he stared into the dark and he prayed.
Shepherd had a secret he wouldn't tell Matt and his wife. It was his son who came to paint and left with their daughter's life. He would keep the story hidden in his heart down deep inside, and just to God up above the truth he would confide. At night he knelt and cried.
Not too far from old Matt's cabin, just up the trail, was the cabin of Jim Lane and daughter Sammy. Miss Sammy Lane was one of those rare young women whose appearance is not to be described. One can, of course, say that she was tall, beautifully tall, with the firmness of a young pine, deep-bosomed, with limbs full-rounded, fairly tingling with the life and strength of perfect womanhood. And it may be said that her face was a face to go with one through the years, and to live still in one's dreams when the sap of life is gone. Preachin' Bill said it right when he reported to all within earshot.
Sammy Lane just plumb near filled up a whole house. And I'll be dead burned if she don't pretty nice fill up all out of doors too, by thunder.
Many in the hills considered Sammy Lane and young Matt as the perfect match, and it was true. A person just couldn't see the pair apart or together without thinking that they should belong to one another. This was not the case, and the thought had scarce passed through Sammy's mind. Young Matt was a different story, though. He had thought of it 100 times or more, but his thoughts were completely without action. Sammy Lane was to marry young Ollie Stewart when he came back from the city, and that was that.
Ollie Stewart had a body and a spirit that was small, and although Sammy Lane was promised to him, he didn't deserve her at all. Now tomorrow he will ride away and leave the hills behind. He's riding to the city, a fortune there to find. Sammy's yet to meet her kind.
As time went along, the stranger in the hills stayed on at the Matthews place and took over the tending of the Matthews flock of sheep. The summer passed, and the people of the hills came to regard the shepherd with affection and trust. He was wise in what he did and said, but he was never arrogant. Old Matt and the shepherd, called now by most everyone Dad, found their friendship growing deeper and stronger. In spite of the difference in education and background, they found much in common. Some bond of fellowship drew them close, and the two men spent many an evening upon the front porch of the log house in quiet talk, while the shadows crept over the valley below and the light went from the sky in back of the clump of pines. There was also a strange comradeship between the thoughtful shepherd and the ignorant, sorely afflicted, and nameless backwoods boy they called Pete. The two were always together, out on the hillside and in the little glens and valleys, during the day with the sheep, or at the ranch in the hollow that was the old man's home. There was a bunk fixed there for young Pete so he could come and go as he would. You see, little Pete lived most of all in the outdoors, away from those who could not understand him, and in close contact with what he called the cloud things, the night things, and the shadow things. Young Matt and Sammy Lane, too, had fallen under the charm of the man with the white hair and the poet's face.
Soon the hills loved this man, even called him Dad. The shepherd solved their problems, made them happy when they were sad. Oh, so happy when they were sad.
There was a man in the hills who, he said, was even bigger and stronger than young Matt. His name was Wash Gibbs, and he was the present undisputed champion of the hills, and everything he undertook to win, he won. Wash Gibbs was also a member and a leader of the Bald Knobbers, a group of vigilante-like men who made their own laws for protection and carried them out. Their judgment was sometimes too quick and too harsh. The boys decided one night to get the man with the different ways, and so with enough liquor in them to make the job feel like fun, they started out for the ranch in Mutton Hollow. Young Matt heard about the attack in time to arrive before the Bald Knobbers, but in the battle that followed, the better numbers won. Most certainly young Matt and the old man would have met a tragic end that night if a strange thing hadn't happened in the moonlight in front of the ranch. A strange apparition appeared and scared Wash Gibbs and his friends away. The ghostly figure seemed to come from the deep shadows and misty lights of the woods and float toward the group. It sobbed and moaned as it came. Young Matt and the shepherd were left alone, staring in amazement at the specter. For a moment, it stood motionless, then turned and vanished, and was completely gone like a ghost.
Through the blue haze of early morning, in the shadows of a misty night, the hill folks say there are ghostly things that float in and out of sight. Now you may say this is foolish, but under an August moon, you swear you can see the night things and hear their mournful tune. One only a ghost can croon.
Several other very mysterious things happened to the old man. In the year of the awful drought, when folks all through the hills and ridges were being forced to leave their holdings and move on to wherever the rains were, the shepherd had a late-night visitor. Poor little Pete came to see him and brought with him a bag of gold, enough to tide the folks over until next year's crop could be brought in. Pete told the old man that the gold was all right and should not be worried about, and that God had sent it to them when they needed it most. Sometime later, one night when an attack on Jim Lane's cabin was in the offing, a strange voice called into young Matt and the shepherd while they were sleeping at the little ranch. It told them to go to the Lane cabin at once, and the voice left them with horses ready for the quick ride to the home of Sammy Lane. These were all things not yet explained to the shepherd of the hills. He often wondered about them. He thought often, too, of the young artist that came to the hills to paint the wonders of nature and of the unnatural pain and sorrow he brought with him. He remembered a son that he had somehow lost long ago. The real friendship of old Matt crossed his mind, too, and he thought of the story that tormented his heart both night and day, a story that he could not bring himself to tell to old Matt.
The shepherd had a secret he wouldn't tell old Matt and his wife. It was his son who came to paint and left with their daughter's life. Pain and sorrow can cut like a knife.
It was in the afternoon in the summer that another stranger came into the hills, looking for the man who had become the shepherd of Mutton Hollow. The new stranger was a famous doctor from the city, and he was a good friend of the man he sought. The doctor went to stay for a while in Mutton Hollow, and the two men talked of other days in another place. The doctor reminded the other man that he too was a part of the city ways, a minister of God, one of the most famous in all the country, a man with one of the largest, finest, biggest churches in Chicago. Why, the doctor wanted to know, had the shepherd given it all up and come into the wilderness to live as a native? "My son," answered the shepherd. "My son came here, and I came to look for him. He is dead, I'm sure, but now I do not want to go back."
The new stranger slept soundly in the night because the life he found in the hills was a strenuous one. But one night, little Pete came to wake the doctor and the shepherd. He asked them to follow, and he made it apparent that the need was both great and urgent. The doctor did not want to go, but the people for miles around had come to depend upon the shepherd of Mutton Hollow in trouble or in sickness, and he was ready to respond. The boy led the two men along a way that was dark and hard to travel. Pete told them they must hurry, and he brought them to the small opening of a cave. Some 20 feet from the entrance, the passage turned sharply to the left and revealed a hallway along which the shepherd could easily walk direct. Pete went forward briskly as one on very familiar ground. He carried a torch, as did the shepherd. The doctor walked between the two, slipping and stumbling as he made his way in the eerie light of the cavern. For some distance, their course dropped downward at a gentle angle, while the ceilings and sides of the cave dripped with moisture. Soon they heard the sound of running water, and entering a wider room, saw sparkling in the torchlight a stream that came from under the rocky wall, crossed their path, and disappeared under the other wall of the chamber. From the bank of the underground creek, the path climbed slightly upward. The footing began to grow firmer, and the walls and ceiling drier. As they went on, the passage too grew wider and higher, until finally they found themselves in a large underground hallway that echoed loudly as they walked. On and on they went. Overhead, pure white stalactites and frost-like formations glittered in the light, and the walls were broken by dark nooks and shelf-like ledges, with here and there openings leading who could tell where. Another room and another ledge, then a long passageway, the ceiling of which was so high that it was beyond the torchlight. Then a series of ledges, and they could see that they were climbing along from shelf to shelf on one side of a huge underground canyon. On and on they went, scarcely pausing to think of the dire consequences of one slip in the footing, until they noticed that they were in a large chamber where the floor was perfectly dry. Pete indicated they were nearing the end of their long and tedious journey. He told them as they pushed their way on through the darkness that inside the cave there was a cabin. Who was in the cabin, they asked Pete, and Pete said he knew. The boy told them he thought it might be God in the cabin because he was good. He told the shepherd that it was the man from the cave who followed him along the trail on his very first day in the hills. And it was this same man who had scared the bald knobbers the night they wanted to murder the shepherd. And the man in the cabin was the one who sent the gold to the hill people when the drought had nearly burned them all out. He could be God, said Pete. He does help people when they need him. The trio continued, this time down a rocky slope that seemed to be a mountain. They found it extremely hard to hold their footing as the loose rocks slipped and rolled downward. But the fatigue was gone now from both the doctor and the shepherd. The boy told them that the man in the cabin had been hurt badly on the night when the bald knobbers had fought down at Jim Lane's cabin. Pete told them that the man in the cabin in the cave was getting worse and worse, and that Pete was afraid he would never be all right again. The boy led the way on the final rough steps to the cabin. And as they neared the cabin in the cave, they could see there was a light in the window. And as they neared it, they could see the door was ajar. Pete led the way. Putting their torches aside, they entered the cabin. And in the glare of the light inside, they found a nicely furnished cabin with a wonderful picture hanging on the wall. And it was almost living as the image of a lovely young girl. And on a bed in the shadow lay a man. A voice faltered, "Father, can you forgive me?" It was immediately apparent that the shepherd had found here in the cave what he had been looking for. The doctor told him that he was sure the shepherd's son had a very few hours left.
The man, in awful pain from a wound in his side, told them the story of a young artist in the hills of Missouri to paint, a man with no intention of staying on in the hills. He told, too, of a beautiful hill girl and a fierce love that blazed through the hot Ozark summer. The artist said that when the world outside saw his pictures, he became famous and elected never to return to the hills for his love. But the fame the city gave him was not solid or firm, and he decided that return to the hills he must. He recalled how he planned to return, apologized to the girl and her family, and asked for her hand in marriage. When he did arrive, he found that the girl he had known had given birth to a son and had died. He had learned that there was nothing left for him in the hills but sadness and hatred and long years of loneliness in the cave that was to become his home.
Father, please forgive me for these things that I have done, and ask God to show his mercy on your wayward son. Then the shepherd who was on his knees slowly began to say, "For the love of a son like you, my boy, pain is so little to pay. God has brought us together today."
It was plain for the shepherd to see that little Pete was wasting away. And Pete in his tormented mind knew that he must soon go, for he talked about it often. When the youngster died, the shepherd took his pen and in the still shadows of his cabin wrote,
Here and there among men, there are those who pause in the hurried rush to listen to the call of a life that is more real. How often have we seen them, jostled and ridiculed by their fellows, pushed aside and forgotten as incompetent or unworthy? He who sees and hears too much is cursed for a dreamer, a fanatic, or a fool by the mad mob. We build churches and temples and will not worship in them. We hire spiritual advisors and refuse to heed them. We buy Bibles, but we will not read them. Believing in God, we do not fear him. Acknowledging Christ, we neither follow nor obey him. Only when we can no longer strive in the battle for earthly honors or material wealth do we strive to see and hear the things we have so long refused to consider. Pete knew a world unseen by us, and we therefore fancied ourselves wiser than he. The wind in the pines, the rustle of the leaves, the murmur of the brook, the growl of thunder, and the voices of the night were all understood and answered by him. The flowers, the trees, the rocks, the hills, and the clouds were to him not lifeless things, but living friends who laughed and wept with him as he was gay or sorrowful. Poor Pete, we said, but was he in truth poorer or richer than we?
They laid the boy beside his mother under the tall pine on the hill.
The artist then slipped from life. He was finally going home. They laid him there in the cave, the mountain for his headstone. In a short time thereafter, little Pete was to leave them too. He followed his mother and daddy to a home up in the blue, a place that little Pete knew.
In the days that came in the future, Sammy Lane found that she could not leave the hills to go with her lover Ollie to the city. Sammy found that the things that had happened in the past months had given her love new substance and thought, and a new lover. Young Matt and Sammy Lane were married, and they built a magnificent cabin. And when the years had claimed old Matt and Aunt Molly, they took the shepherd of Mutton Hollow to live with them, and he became a father to them both.
The old man lived for many years with these people he loved, and he grew very old. And even now, when the sweet, clean smell of spring begins to rustle through the rugged, rolling Ozark Mountains of Missouri, there are those who say, and believe it so, that the quiet man with the poet's face can still be seen on the trail that is nobody knows how old. Of course, most of us know better. But when the sun goes slipping down in the blue hills that lie stretching out from Inspiration Point, it is hard to say what's false and what's true, and what is make-believe and what is real. And after all, he was the shepherd of the hills.
The shepherd stayed in the hills. This was his home, he said. He saw young Matt and Sammy find true love and wed. As the years claimed old Matt and his good sweet wife, he stayed with young Matt and Sammy, there to live a long happy life, there to live a long happy life. He lived a long happy life. The story that I tell you is one that is old. The story that I tell you is one that is bold. You've heard it many times before. This has often been said, and I know you'll hear it once again before you're dead.